We'll start soon.
What is the ideal, and how do we get there? Hello, everybody. My name is Brendan, and we will be exploring how all beneficial relationships require sacrifice to reach the ideal, as shown through The Swiss Family Robinson. The Swiss Family Robinson was a book written in the mid-1700s in response to Robinson Crusoe, the first of the Deserted Islander adventure novels. The author of Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Defoe, once stated, "Those people cannot enjoy comfortably what God has given them because they see and covet what he has not given them. All of our discontents for what we want appear to me to spring from our want of thankfulness for what we have." This quote is the embodiment of the lesson of my book, as it is a didactic work that is meant to teach and to show people how to reach their ideals. A little bit about the book. There is a family traveling from Switzerland to Australia to start their new life there. They have stock and all their pieces of equipment and furniture and such on a ship. They come into a hurricane and the ship is destroyed and they are stranded on an island. The crew is all abandoned ship and leaves them all to just themselves. They, after a few days, make it onto shore and erect this little tent on the beach. And they are very thankful at this moment because God has delivered them from their great peril in this hurricane. And through the strongest of all nature's storms, their bond as a family held together and wasn't ripped and shredded apart as many of the earthly things that were on the island and the ship around them. The family is made up of the mother, the father, and 4 boys. On their time in the island, the book chronicles it through mainly where they live. So throughout the first year, they live in a tent on the beach, and then they move on to a treehouse, which they call Falconhurst. This is where they start exploring and figuring out the plants and animals on the island and how they need to live and be successful. Then as they explore more, they find a rock grotto, and they make that a house in there, and they call it Rockburg. All in all, they were on the island for 11 years before the rescue ship found them. And over this time, their faith, their family, and their sacrifice they made to preserve all the 3 of these held them together. The faith. Johann Wyss, the author of The Swiss Family Robinson, was a Protestant from Bern, Switzerland. He was a lector at his church in the town of his residence. He desired his children to grow up into the most perfect version of themselves, and for them to become good Christians and family men. The Robinsons' family's bond and dependence on Father is similar to their greater dependence on God, the real rock in which they have trusted their lives along the arduous journey, and especially while they were on the island. It is not ironic that they live in a tree, a symbol of life and growth, as well as a grotto that they christen Rockburg. The rock is the church and their bond as a family. Their faith leads to their family. The Robinson family is meant to be a proxy to Wyss and his real family. Each member of the family in the text is meant to represent a real person that was part of Wyss's actual family. This includes their strengths and endeavors, as well as their deficits and weaknesses. Parents are meant to lead their children into virtuous and fruitful lives. They do this by shepherding their children. A shepherd takes care of his flock so that all the flock remains safe and protected from the dangerous jaws of wild animals that will come and prey upon the flock, if not tended to by the shepherd. Mother is the kind of shepherd in the family who keeps everyone in line and allows for Father, the spiritual guide of the family, to allow all of them to reach epiphanies and to keep them from straying from the flock. These 2 are preserved by the sacrifice that they all embody. Every character sacrifices innumerable amounts while they're on this island. Every character sacrifices a ton, but Mother is the most sacrificial character that is exhibited. This is ironic because Mother is not mentioned very much in the text, as she's always doing the things that everybody else would have done, but she's doing them for them so that they can continue to better themselves and reach their ideals. One example of a great sacrifice in the book is when a huge snake invades their home area, and they as a family, and they take all their animals and shut them up in their houses and barns. After a few days, they start to run out of food for their animals, and so they decide to turn them loose so that they can just escape from the snake and they'll find them later. When they turn them loose, their donkey Grizzle decides to turn and run towards the serpent and let all the other animals run the other way. This act of selfless dedication was very evident because he went towards the snake, and in the end, the snake ended up killing and eating the donkey. But this allowed enough time for the family to shoot at and kill the snake eventually. Father, after they had defeated this serpent, claimed that it was something of the devil, that the devil had inhabited to cause ruin and destruction among them physically and in their lives. So the opposite of the devil would be God. And God is said to be perfect. And the perfect is the divine, as the Father represents the ideal patriarch. It is fair to assume that the ideal is striving for the perfect. One who is striving for the perfect would want to follow somebody that is perfect and mimic them. Maybe an exhibitor of power and wisdom is what a perfect person is. A perfect person is a great king ruling in power and splendor over a vast realm of light and love, possessed within its boundaries a desolate and unfruitful island. This spot he made the object of his special care, and lavishing on it all the varied resources of his might and goodness. It bloomed in beauty and became the happy residence of a band of colonists, who were not charged only with the cultivation and improvement of the soil, but each individually was bound to cherish in his soul the spirit of love and true allegiance to his sovereign. That was a quote by Father whenever he was giving you could call it a sermon to his children, and how to reach farther and farther into the ideal. Father was the ideal representation of the world to his family. His familial unit was his responsibility to cultivate. Another quote that embodies is, "It will make me happy to think that my simple narrative may lead to some of these to observe how blessed are the results and patient continuance in well-doing, what benefits arise from the thoughtful application of knowledge and science, and how good and pleasant a thing is when brethren dwell together in unity under the eyes of parental love." Wyss wrote this book to teach his children lessons. As the characters represent the ideal states of the physical people themselves and conceptions of the family that the reader is supposed to mimic. The family has good health and excellent bond, and they existed in a state of harmony. There was never any cataloged fights or sicknesses or just overall bad circumstances, except when they related to nature. That enabled them to survive and create a fruitful success from their unfortunate situation. As the boys are being refined in their pursuits, they are becoming the model of a good citizen. Now, a good citizen, according to Father, is model Christians. And since Father has guided them to personal epiphanies, as well as model family men that Mother has developed them into over their time on the island, model family men as well. From the beginning of creation, God did not desire for man to be alone. Faith is about relationships. To understand this, God beckons us to be like children, as the figures in the text that are learning are in fact children. There's a certain humility in this, to stand as one is and not to compete, to simply enjoy the presence of others. Relationships are built on this simple kind of humility. Out of great innocence comes the realization that one needs others, and the trust that there is in that other person, the help that they seek in the absence of this trust. Everyone gives birth to a hardness of heart that brings fear and ultimate isolation. So one asks, can one trust God to be God? Or can one trust a mother or a father to be a mother or a father? Relationships are nurtured when people pause and reveal their vulnerability and then simply trust the other. Relationships benefit from this ability to forgive and move on. That is a challenge, since God has made us dependent people. People are not only dependent on God, but on each other and all creation. It is not good for us to be alone. Since every character in the book is based on a real person in Wyss's family, each one exemplifies a trait that they possessed that was beneficial to others. In turn, every character has a downfall, but these are not specific to the character, but to the whole of humanity. A great sacrifice is what improved the relationship between the members of the family and their God. The relationship, their success on the island was dependent on each other, and their sacrifice was necessary to maintain the relationships that created a successful settlement. We should heed the advice of Father regarding how to sacrifice and maintain the strongest of bonds when he says, I described to my boys as we went along the process of retting and explained to them how steeping the flax leaves destroys the useless membrane while the strong fibers remain. The fibers of the flax plant are concealed within the leaves of the plant. This is the same as the virtues that are concealed within the children. The novel sought to teach the children to become the best versions of themselves. And in order to do so, they must endure the retting process of destroying the weaker attributes of themselves to reveal the ideal parts. Just as the characters practice this retting, we should ret ourselves so that we can identify the ideal traits of ourselves and sacrifice our good to achieve beneficial relationships with others. Thank you.
Great job.
Questions?
So in the family, is there one more important than the other, or are they all?
Like the members of it?
Yeah, like mother, father.
In the book, it focuses on how Father is the patriarch and how he's seen as a proxy to God, and the family all looks up to God, and it's the father's supposed to be shown through the book, and the children are supposed to relate to their father as the highest power.
Okay.
Yes.
So Swiss Family Robinson, a lot of times we think about that as a survival story. And yet, as we look closer, maybe there's more than just surviving, but thriving. So at what point do you feel like this family went from surviving to thriving? What happened to change?
I think they went from surviving to thriving the second that they got off the ship and onto the island, because some of them were at a time where they were, one of the most thankful times of the entire time they were on the island came in those first few weeks when they were just in that little shack of a tent on the beach, and they realized that they're in God's creation and that they were in bliss and they did not need to purely survive, but that they were taken care of by their bond as a family and their faith, and they would make it through. Yes.
Do you think that, like, in any moment while they were on their island, where there wasn't a time that they were thriving, where there was a time where they didn't have hope, or they were struggling, they weren't sure what this was going to happen?
Not particularly. They always found a way to succeed in what they were doing, and a lot of it came from the teachings of Father and Mother. And they really didn't have a time where they were looking for other things.
You mentioned some things that were like bad in their character that like they were trying to fix
Yes.
right away. What were like the main ones?
Just like vices of young children. Since the children, when they landed on the island, they were from like 5 to 15 in ages, and as they grew up, they became into young men. And so any vices that teenagers make, they're always teenage personalities. They're stubborn, and they don't like to listen, and they don't like to take the advice of their parents. But in the book, we see it the complete opposite. They will always take the advice because they know how valuable the teachings of their mother and father are.